Today, we are going to tear down that facade and expose the reality of what is actually floating inside those containers. The truth is that the dairy industry has fundamentally changed over the last few decades, and those changes do not show up in the marketing copy. Some of the most trusted and familiar brands in your grocery store are utilizing aggressive industrial processing techniques that strip away natural nutrients and destroy flavor profiles before the milk ever leaves the factory. Other companies have terrifying histories of contamination and silent recalls that are quickly swept under the rug. We have even seen independent laboratory testing reveal industrial plastic chemicals lurking inside products marketed specifically to health-conscious consumers. We are going to walk through an exhaustive investigation of the dairy industry, breaking down 11 milk brands that you need to seriously reconsider, followed by 5 exceptional brands that actually honor the promise of real dairy. We begin this investigation at number 11 with Great Value Milk. This is the carton that wins on simple, undeniable math. When you are rushing through the store and trying to keep your grocery bill down, grabbing the store brand that is a few dollars cheaper than everything else feels like a straightforward financial victory. But to understand why that price tag is an illusion, you have to understand the modern industrial dairy complex. The overwhelming majority of budget milk comes from massive, hyper-consolidated factory farming operations. These are facilities where thousands of cows are kept in tight quarters and fed highly processed, grain-heavy diets, specifically engineered to maximize fluid output at the expense of nutritional density. These animals are entirely divorced from their natural grazing behaviors. As a direct result, the milk they produce is biologically hollow. It tastes flat, incredibly thin, and lacks the rich complexity that dairy is supposed to have. Great Value operates entirely within this race-to-the-bottom system. When you look closely at consumer watchdog groups and grocery review platforms, the complaints against this brand create a disturbing and consistent pattern. Shoppers regularly report that the milk goes sour mere days after opening, well before the printed expiration date. Others describe a faintly metallic or watered-down chemical taste, right out of a freshly broken seal. But the sensory issues are only half the problem. In recent years, this specific brand name was swept up in a massive nationwide recall connected to potential listeria contamination through a third-party manufacturing partner handling their plant-based lines. While the dairy and plant-based lines might be processed differently, they share the same corporate umbrella and the same shelf space. When a brand's logistics network fails to the point of a fatal bacterial contamination, the automatic trust you place in that logo has to be revoked. The bargain price is simply a down payment on a compromised product. At number 10, we find a brand that operates on the exact opposite end of the pricing spectrum, but carries its own set of deeply frustrating problems. Horizon Organic is the carton that premium shoppers reach for with absolute confidence. The bright red packaging featuring a happy flying cow combined with the word organic printed in massive letters creates a powerful psychological halo. You pay almost double the price of conventional milk because you believe you are funding cleaner agricultural practices, open green pastures, and a company that prioritizes animal welfare over corporate profits. However, the documented reality of their supply chain tells a much more complicated story. Horizon is a massive corporate entity that sources its milk from a vast network of large-scale suppliers. Over the years, rigorous, independent agricultural investigations have raised serious documented questions about the actual amount of meaningful pasture time these cows are receiving. This is not just an ethical debate about animal happiness, it is a hard nutritional science issue. Genuine, pasture-raised cows eating a diet of fresh grasses naturally produce milk that contains significantly higher concentrations of omega-3 fatty acids and conjugated linoleic acid. These are the specific heart-healthy fats that make high-quality dairy a superfood. When a massive supplier relies heavily on organic grains rather than true pasture grazing to feed thousands of animals, those crucial nutritional advantages evaporate. Furthermore, to survive massive national distribution networks, Horizon products frequently undergo ultra-high temperature pasteurization. This extreme heat treatment blasts the milk to extend its shelf life for months, but in the process, it obliterates delicate natural enzymes, degrades water-soluble vitamins, and fundamentally alters the protein structures. You are paying top dollar for a product that uses the word organic to mask a highly industrialized, heavily processed reality. Number 9 targets a very specific and highly vulnerable demographic. Lactaid has built an empire on a simple, comforting promise: all the joy of real dairy without the devastating digestive fallout. For millions of people who have spent years suffering from intense bloating, abdominal cramping, and unpredictable digestive distress every time they pour milk into their morning coffee, this brand looks like an absolute lifesaver. But the label utilizes a very clever scientific misdirection. Lactaid removes the lactose sugar, But lactose is only one potential trigger for dairy intolerance. The proteins present in cow's milk, specifically whey and casein, remain completely untouched in this product. If your immune system or digestive tract is actually reacting to those specific protein structures, which is incredibly common, buying lactose-free milk will do absolutely nothing to solve your physical discomfort. You will still experience the exact same bloating and pain, leaving you confused and frustrated. Beyond the protein issue, the process of neutralizing lactose fundamentally changes how the human body metabolizes the product. To make the milk lactose-free, the manufacturer adds an enzyme called lactase, which breaks the complex lactose sugars down into simpler sugars called glucose and galactose. This is why lactate tastes so noticeably artificially sweet compared to regular milk. But more importantly, because those sugars are already broken down, they hit your bloodstream much faster, causing a sharper, more rapid spike in your blood glucose levels. If you are a diabetic or someone actively monitoring your glycemic response for metabolic health, this hidden sugar rush is a massive problem. To compound these physiological issues, the brand was recently forced to issue a sweeping recall across more than 24 states due to a terrifying cross-contamination failure involving trace amounts of almonds. For a brand that caters specifically to people managing food sensitivities, accidentally exposing customers to a severe nut allergen is an unforgivable failure of quality control. Number 8 brings us out of the health food section and directly into the crosshairs of childhood marketing. TrueMoo is designed from the ground up to appeal to kids. The packaging is vibrant, the branding is playful, and exhausted parents regularly throw it into their shopping carts because it feels like a harmless, familiar treat that will finally get their children to drink some calcium. But the reality of what is inside this bottle is deeply concerning. In recent years, an incredibly disturbing incident unfolded across several school districts in Texas. Local cafeterias had to pull TrueMoo strawberry milk from their service lines because students were reporting that the liquid inside the cartons was visibly grotesque. Children described the milk as being slimy, heavily clumped together, and completely abnormal in texture. Kids who consumed the compromised product began experiencing intense, severe stomach pain, and the situation escalated to the point where at least one child required emergency hospitalization. While local contamination incidents can happen to any massive food distributor, the baseline formulation of TrueMoo is a disaster even when the factory is running perfectly. The ingredient list reads like a blueprint for metabolic dysfunction. The milk is aggressively processed and completely loaded with excessive amounts of added refined sugars and synthetic artificial flavorings. Despite the massive sugar dump, adult consumers who have tested the chocolate and strawberry variants consistently describe the actual mouthfeel as watery, thin, and entirely devoid of any authentic dairy richness. When a manufacturer manages to make a product overwhelmingly sweet while simultaneously making it taste watered down, it means the core dairy ingredient has been processed into oblivion. Marketing a hyper-sweetened, chemically flavored beverage to young children under the guise of wholesome childhood nutrition is a cynical strategy, especially when it comes attached to hospital reports and a texture that occasionally turns to slime. Number 7 relies almost entirely on generational nostalgia to move units. Borden Dairy features the iconic smiling face of Elsie the cow on every label. That friendly cartoon mascot has been a staple of American grocery stores for so long that consumers associate the brand with a simpler, cleaner era of food production. But the friendly cow is hiding a deeply troubled corporate history. The Borden Company has endured multiple financial collapses, filing for bankruptcy twice in recent memory. When a massive legacy food corporation is fighting tooth and nail just to keep the lights on and satisfy creditors, the operational decisions made in the boardroom begin to reflect absolute desperation. That financial pressure inevitably bleeds into the manufacturing process through relentless corner cutting. Quality controls are reduced, cheaper feed is sourced for the animals, and extending the shelf life of the liquid becomes the single most important metric, completely superseding taste and nutritional value. Borden milk is the epitome of conventional, factory-farmed dairy. It relies on grain-fed cows packed into commercial facilities. For consumers with sensitive biological systems, this highly specific brand of conventional, stress-induced dairy is frequently cited as a major trigger for inflammatory responses, including severe acne flare-ups, eczema, and systemic bloating. When you look at consumer feedback, the sensory complaints are undeniable. Shoppers routinely note that the standard milk tastes completely flat, oddly cooked, and leaves a lingering metallic residue on the palate. This cooked flavor is the undeniable signature of a company utilizing aggressive thermal processing to squeeze every possible day of shelf life out of a diminishing product. When corporate survival becomes the only goal, product integrity is always the first casualty. Number 6 might be the most shocking inclusion for the fitness community. Fairlife burst onto the scene and completely disrupted the dairy aisle by marketing itself as a technological marvel. Using advanced ultrafiltration processes, they promised a product that was significantly higher in protein, lower in sugar, and fundamentally cleaner than anything else on the market. The sleek, modern packaging practically screamed performance and health, and millions of athletes and wellness advocates gladly paid a premium price to drink it. Then, the facade was shattered by independent laboratory testing. Consumer Reports, a highly respected watchdog organization, launched an investigation into popular dairy products and ended up sending a formal public warning letter to Fairlife. Their laboratory analysis of Fairlife's core nutritional shakes revealed elevated, highly concerning levels of phthalates. Phthalates are not agricultural byproducts. They are harsh industrial chemicals utilized in the manufacturing of plastics to make materials more flexible and durable. They have absolutely no business being inside the human body. The testing data indicated that the phthalate concentrations found inside this specific premium health product ranked among the absolute highest levels recorded across all of the food categories they examined. The scientific literature surrounding phthalate exposure is terrifying. Even at low chronic levels of ingestion, these industrial plasticizers are heavily linked to severe endocrine disruption, hormonal imbalances, and long-term reproductive health complications. This is not a hypothetical concern about the plastic bottle degrading in the sun. This is hard, peer-reviewed testing demonstrating that a product actively marketed as the ultimate healthy dairy option was heavily contaminated with industrial chemicals. You pay a massive premium because the marketing copy convinces you that the product is technologically superior, only to discover you are ingesting a chemical cocktail. Number 5 brings us back to the trap of retail loyalty. Market Pantry is the ubiquitous store brand of Target. The psychological mechanism here is simple to understand. Millions of consumers genuinely love shopping at Target. They trust the store's aesthetic, they trust the pharmacy, and they naturally extend that deep corporate trust to the store-branded groceries. Because you are already navigating the aisles with a red cart, throwing a cheaper gallon of Market Pantry milk into the basket feels like smart, efficient household economics. However, this specific private label brand has accumulated a highly disturbing pattern of legal and regulatory failures. Target was slapped with a massive class action lawsuit specifically targeting their Market Pantry dairy creamers. Laboratory analysis and consumer audits strongly suggested that the company was systematically underfilling the containers, delivering significantly fewer actual servings than what was boldly printed on the nutritional label. That kind of discrepancy is not a minor calibration error on a factory line. It is a fundamental violation of consumer trust regarding labeling accuracy. But the problems go far beyond volume disputes. Market Pantry dairy products have been at the center of dangerous salmonella scares connected to severely contaminated powdered milk ingredients hidden in their supply chain. Even worse, the brand has been forced to recall products because they completely failed to declare major life-threatening allergens on the packaging, including hidden traces of egg, extra whey, and unlisted milk proteins in cross-manufactured items. For a family managing a severe pediatric food allergy, an undeclared allergen is not a paperwork error. It is a trip to the emergency room in the back of an ambulance. Add in the daily avalanche of reviews complaining about cartons arriving unsealed, milk separating into watery chunks days before expiration, and a totally unpredictable flavor profile, and the illusion of value completely vanishes. Number 4 is the definition of an autopilot grocery purchase. Lucerne is the massive dairy label backing grocery giants like Safeway and Albertsons. It is the milk you grab without thinking because it is always there, stacked high in the cooler, sporting a familiar, inoffensive label and a completely average price point. It demands absolutely no cognitive effort from the shopper, which is exactly how millions of substandard gallons end up in American refrigerators every single week. But if you stop and examine the regulatory history of this brand, the autopilot logic completely falls apart. Over the years, Lucerne has faced a relentless series of documented recalls that should make any consumer pause. We are not just talking about minor spoilage issues. Their facilities have been tied to massive salmonella outbreaks within their broader supply chain. More terrifyingly, the brand was forced into a major recall in recent years because physical foreign materials were literally discovered floating inside the finished milk products. Finding industrial debris or unidentified foreign matter inside a sealed carton of dairy is not an abstract statistical anomaly. It is a visceral, horrifying failure of basic factory sanitation and quality assurance. When a manufacturing chain is moving at that kind of breakneck speed to supply thousands of massive retail locations, the product is stripped of any actual care. Shoppers consistently report the exact same set of failures across state lines: milk curdling into thick, sour clumps an entire week before the sell-by date, a bizarrely cheesy fermented aftertaste lingering in fresh gallons, and cheap plastic caps that fail to hold an airtight seal, allowing the milk to oxidize and rot prematurely. When you combine this level of operational sloppiness with the standard cocktail of factory-farmed additives and flavor standardizers, opening your refrigerator becomes a weekly gamble. Number 3 challenges the entire economic philosophy of warehouse shopping. Kirkland's signature conventional milk from Costco is the ultimate bulk purchase. The logic is incredibly seductive for a busy household. You buy 2 massive, heavy plastic jugs strapped together for a fraction of the cost per ounce, reducing your grocery trips and feeling like a master of personal finance. On paper, it is a brilliant strategy. In practice, it is often a frustrating waste of money. The primary issue with Kirkland conventional dairy is exactly that. It is aggressively conventional. These cows are raised in massive, hyper-industrial environments and fed almost exclusively on cheap, genetically modified grain crops. To keep these animals producing at the unnatural, extreme volumes required to supply thousands of Costco warehouses globally, conventional farms often rely heavily on the continuous administration of antibiotics. Pushing a biological organism past its natural limits inevitably leads to illness, and the prophylactic use of antibiotics in these massive herds is a major driver of the global antibiotic resistance crisis. You are directly participating in that agricultural model when you buy these twin packs. Furthermore, to ensure that these massive jugs of milk can survive the brutal logistics of nationwide warehouse distribution without spoiling on the palate, Kirkland conventional milk is subjected to extreme punishing heat treatments. The pasteurization process is so aggressive that it effectively annihilates the natural flavor profile of the liquid. Consumers who buy these bulk packs routinely describe the milk as tasting entirely flat, utterly dull, and carrying a distinct, lingering cooked flavor that ruins a simple bowl of cereal. Ultimately, buying cheap milk in massive bulk only saves you money if your family actually wants to drink it. When you are regularly pouring half a gallon of dull, slightly sour liquid down the kitchen sink because nobody wants to finish it, your impressive per-unit savings vanish entirely. Number 2 is a masterclass in deceptive packaging and false health halos. Shamrock Farms Rockin' Protein operates in a very specific, highly lucrative lane. Everything about the visual design of these rigid plastic bottles screams athletic performance. The bold typography, the sleek contours, and the aggressive marketing copy are all specifically engineered to make you feel like you are consuming a highly scientific recovery tool after a grueling workout. But when you turn the bottle around and actually read the nutritional panel, the entire illusion shatters. Certain formulations of this supposedly healthy recovery beverage have been clocked containing more than 40 grams of highly refined added sugar in a single serving. That is an absolute metabolic nightmare. 40 grams of sugar turns what is supposed to be a fitness supplement into a liquefied dessert that will aggressively spike your insulin levels and completely derail your metabolic recovery. When consumer backlash forced the brand to address this massive sugar load, their solution was arguably worse. They pivoted to utilizing harsh, synthetic artificial sweeteners, specifically loading the product with sucralose and acesulfame potassium. To mask the chemical aftertaste and maintain a thick, satisfying mouthfeel, they pump the liquid full of heavy industrial thickeners, primarily carrageenan. For thousands of people with sensitive gastrointestinal tracts, carrageenan is a known, heavily documented trigger for severe intestinal inflammation, painful bloating, and chronic digestive distress. To make matters worse, the brand leans heavily on lactose-free marketing claims, leading many buyers to assume the product is totally safe for dairy-sensitive stomachs. But as we established earlier, lactose-free cow's milk still contains the highly reactive whey and casein protein structures that cause massive allergic responses. Adding an almond cross-contamination recall to this chaotic ingredient profile proves that the athletic branding is doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting to cover up a highly processed, chemically thick, biologically confusing beverage. At the absolute bottom of the avoid list, sitting firmly at number 1, is a product that borders on dietary sabotage. Nesquik is not just a brand, it is a deeply embedded cultural memory. The bright, cheerful yellow packaging and the iconic cartoon rabbit have been a fixture in American pantries for generations. Millions of parents buy this powder on absolute autopilot, driven entirely by their own childhood nostalgia, believing it is a harmless, fun way to trick their children into consuming essential bone-building calcium. But if you strip away the cartoon rabbit and analyze the chemical reality of this product, it is genuinely horrifying. The ingredient list is a terrifying stack of artificial interventions. It is dominated by massive quantities of cheap, highly refined sugars, followed closely by a cocktail of synthetic artificial flavorings, aggressive chemical thickeners, multiple industrial gums, and heavy doses of red 40 food dye. The sugar concentration is so extreme that the vitamins and calcium loudly advertised on the front of the box are completely negated by the metabolic damage caused by the sugar rush. You are essentially pouring liquid candy into a child's developing biological system first thing in the morning, conditioning their young, impressionable palate to reject natural, unsweetened foods in favor of hyperpalatable, engineered chemical sweetness. Beyond the nutritional catastrophe, the physical product itself is frequently defective. Consumers have lodged thousands of complaints detailing how the powder rapidly degrades into rock-hard, chalky masses that completely refuse to dissolve in cold milk, leaving a sludgy, chemical residue at the bottom of the glass. The brand has faced intense legal scrutiny over completely misleading label claims, attempting to boldly declare no artificial flavors while utilizing a heavily engineered, synthetic ingredient profile. Furthermore, the product has a dark history of salmonella recalls linked to severely contaminated base ingredients. All of this chaos originates from Nestlé, a massive global conglomerate with one of the darkest, most highly documented histories of water rights violations, sourcing controversies, and catastrophic public health disputes in modern corporate history. You are not giving your child a healthy morning routine. You are feeding them a chemical experiment. But this massive investigation was not compiled simply to leave you staring hopelessly at an empty refrigerator, convinced that the entire dairy industry is a toxic wasteland. The reality is that there are brilliant, dedicated agricultural companies fighting back against this hyper-industrialized nightmare. There are brands doing dairy the right way, and when you finally taste their products, it feels like discovering an entirely different beverage category. We are going to walk through the top 5 exceptional brands that completely restore the promise of real nourishing milk. Sitting at number 5 on the approved list is Organic Valley. This company proves that it is actually possible to achieve massive national scale without completely abandoning your agricultural soul. Organic Valley is a massive cooperative, but they hold incredibly strict lines regarding how their animals are treated. Unlike the massive factory farms we discussed earlier, Organic Valley strictly mandates that their cows spend meaningful, extensive time grazing on actual living pasture. Their entire production philosophy is oriented around the quality of the final liquid, rather than simply maximizing the sheer volume of output per animal. This dedication shows up undeniably in the laboratory testing of their milk. Compared to standard conventional dairy, Organic Valley milk consistently registers significantly higher levels of potent antioxidants, vitamin E, iron, and crucial trace minerals like selenium. If you seek out their highly specific grass milk product line, the nutritional profile explodes, delivering vastly superior concentrations of omega-3 fatty acids and CLA. This is exactly the kind of robust, disease-fighting nutritional profile that health-conscious shoppers are desperately hoping for when they pay a premium for organic labels. Organic Valley completely prohibits the use of synthetic, highly dangerous growth hormones. They completely ban toxic pesticide exposure by utilizing strictly non-GMO, organic feed. They absolutely refuse to utilize routine, prophylactic antibiotics, completely removing themselves from the agricultural practices driving global antibiotic resistance. The ingredient list is pristine simply because the foundational farming process is pristine. Maintaining this level of agricultural integrity while supplying massive national grocery chains is an incredibly difficult logistical tightrope, but Organic Valley walks it beautifully. When you pour a glass, the deep, complex flavor immediately validates the price tag. Number 4 completely changes what you expect to see when you break the seal on a new carton. Kelowna Supernatural is a brand that forces you to remember what milk looked like before industrial factories engineered the character out of it. When you open a bottle of Kelowna for the first time, you will physically see a thick, rich, distinct layer of natural cream sitting heavily at the absolute top of the liquid. Modern, hyper-processed dairy has psychologically conditioned consumers to expect a perfectly uniform, watery, pure white liquid with zero structural variation. Seeing thick golden cream behave exactly the way cream is biologically supposed to behave, separating and rising to the top, feels almost shocking to the modern eye. That visual alone guarantees you are holding a superior product. Kelowna achieves this by completely rejecting the homogenization process. By keeping the milk non-homogenized, the complex, incredibly healthy fat structures remain completely intact, giving the milk a dense, luxurious, full-bodied mouthfeel that standard shattered grocery store milk can never replicate. But their processing brilliance goes further. Instead of blasting the milk with extreme nutrient-destroying heat to stretch the shelf life to unnatural lengths, Kelowna utilizes a highly specific low-temperature pasteurization method. This gentle, highly controlled thermal approach safely eliminates dangerous pathogens while carefully preserving the fragile natural enzymes and the incredibly fresh complex flavor notes that aggressive industrial processing utterly annihilates. Their milk is sourced exclusively from 100% grass-fed cows living on small, fiercely independent organic family farms. You will find absolutely no synthetic hormones, zero GMO feed, no unnecessary antibiotic cocktails, and zero trace pesticides. They even prioritize your hormonal health by utilizing highly specific BPA and BPS-free packaging materials, acknowledging that the plastic chemicals leaching from cheap containers are just as dangerous as bad milk. Number 3 proves that doing less to a product actually yields a vastly superior result. Strauss Family Creamery is a brand that is almost impossible to describe with words. You simply have to taste the difference to believe it. Just like our previous entry, Strauss strictly refuses to homogenize their milk, meaning the thick, luxurious cream is allowed to rise naturally to the top of the glass, preserving the vital structural integrity of the healthy dairy fats. When you take your first sip of Strauss, the flavor profile is incredibly striking. It is noticeably wonderfully sweeter and undeniably fresher than anything you have ever poured out of a standard plastic jug. This incredible sweetness is not the result of sneaky added synthetic sugars. It is the natural, unadulterated flavor of pristine dairy that has not had its soul destroyed by a factory. To protect this delicate, complex flavor profile, Strauss utilizes a very careful, high-temperature, short-time pasteurization method. This means the milk is flashed with heat for a fraction of a second to ensure absolute biological safety, rather than being subjected to the prolonged, agonizing, extreme thermal blasting that massive commercial dairies use to keep their products sitting on shelves for months. The ingredient panel on a bottle of Strauss is almost comically, beautifully short. Organic milk. That is the entire list. There are no synthetic chemical gums, no harsh industrial thickeners, no artificial stabilizers, and no weird coloring agents. You are paying for exceptionally clean dairy sourced from pasture-raised, deeply cared-for cows living on small, sustainable family farms, operating entirely without synthetic growth hormones or unnecessary pharmaceutical interventions. When you spend years drinking the watery, metallic, cooked liquid sold by industrial megacorporations, a bottle of Strauss does not just taste slightly better, it fundamentally recalibrates your entire biological baseline for what food is supposed to taste like. It makes going back to the cheap, processed stuff physically difficult. Number 2 on the best list elevates the concept of specialized sourcing to an entirely new level. Maple Hill Creamery is a brand that creates a highly specific, undeniable sensory experience. When you pour a glass of Maple Hill and take a drink, there is a distinct moment where your brain registers that the flavor is fundamentally different from normal milk. It takes a second to place the exact note, but you quickly realize the liquid is drastically richer, overwhelmingly more present on the palate, and tastes exactly like something that was sourced directly from an actual living farm rather than piped through a sterile stainless steel processing facility. That profound difference in taste is not an accident. It is the direct biological result of an absolutely uncompromising, 100% grass-fed agricultural diet. Maple Hill strictly guarantees that their cows consume absolutely no corn and no grain at any point in their entire life cycle or the production process. This strict, purely grass-fed diet fundamentally alters the biochemical makeup of the milk. Grass-fed dairy naturally develops significantly higher, highly potent levels of omega-3 fatty acids, powerful beta-carotene, and crucial fat-soluble vitamins A and E. The critical ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids in genuine, 100% grass-fed milk sits exactly where peer-reviewed nutritional research says it needs to be to actively support complex cardiovascular and cognitive health. This is a massive, life-altering departure from the inflammatory, grain-fed dairy produced by conventional factories, where that exact same fatty acid ratio is severely inverted. To maximize this nutritional density, Maple Hill specifically sources their milk from Jersey cows, a unique, highly prized heritage breed that naturally produces a liquid with vastly higher concentrations of dense protein, highly bioavailable calcium, and thick, rich butterfat compared to the standard high-volume Holstein cows used by commercial dairies. Absolutely zero synthetic growth hormones, no antibiotics. Every single agricultural decision points directly toward elite quality. Finally, taking the absolute number 1 spot is a brand that is fundamentally, biologically changing how human bodies react to dairy. Alexandra Family Farm is a total revelation. The most incredible, compelling feedback you read about Alexandra milk is rarely focused strictly on the taste, even though the rich, grassy flavor is undeniably spectacular. The thousands of 5-star reviews are almost entirely focused on what miraculously stopped happening to the consumer's body after they made the switch. People who had spent their entire adult lives suffering from severe painful bloating 30 minutes after drinking a glass of milk. People who lived with a constant, vague, low-level heaviness and digestive discomfort that they simply accepted as the unavoidable tax for consuming dairy suddenly found total relief. They switched to Alexandra, and the pain completely vanished. The biological explanation for this miracle is the A2 protein. The brilliant farmers at Alexandria have specifically, meticulously bred their herds to produce milk that contains absolutely nothing but the A2 beta-casein protein structure. They have completely bred out the A1 protein, which is the dominant, highly reactive protein structure found in the vast, overwhelming majority of commercial cow's milk across America. For a massive, largely undiagnosed portion of the human population, this specific A1 protein is the actual biological trigger causing the severe intestinal inflammation and digestive agony they have incorrectly been blaming on lactose intolerance for decades. This is a total paradigm shift. This is not a lactose issue, which is why chemical interventions like Lactaid totally fail to solve the problem for millions of people. It is a fundamental structural protein issue, and Alexander has completely solved it through brilliant regenerative farming. Their cows live entirely on lush, fully grass-fed diets, driving the omega-3 and CLA content to the absolute maximum levels associated with elite, disease-preventing nutrition. The milk is minimally interfered with, completely avoiding harsh industrial processing, allowing the thick, golden cream to rise naturally to the top of the bottle. No synthetic hormones, no prophylactic antibiotics, no toxic pesticides, and no GMOs if walking down the dairy aisle has felt like a depressing losing game for years. This is the bottle that completely rewrites the rules. Ultimately, this entire investigation reveals one terrifying truth. The simple word milk, printed on a label, provides cover for an extraordinary, wildly varying range of liquids. In one carton, you might find a heavily processed, nutritionally vacant liquid hiding a terrifying history of industrial plastic contamination, undeclared life-threatening allergens, and an ingredient profile dominated by synthetic sugars and toxic food dyes. In the carton sitting right next to it, you might find the cleanest, most nutrient-dense, thoughtfully produced superfood available in the modern grocery store. The critical difference between these two realities is almost never visible on the front of the packaging where the marketing team controls the narrative. The truth lives in the fine print of the ingredient list, in the silent sourcing practices that massive corporations desperately try to hide, and in the physical behavior of the liquid itself when you finally break the seal. Taking one extra minute in the dairy aisle to flip the carton around, ignore the smiling cartoon animals, and actually read the nutritional panel is the absolute difference between buying a dangerous, processed illusion and bringing home genuine, life-sustaining nutrition.